Hi, Jay. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for having me on. I am actually a Roman Catholic, but I'm trying to consider Orthodoxy, and the main reason is not about all the discussions that you're regularly having about filioque and the various theological issues, but my issues are more like spiritual. So I wanted to ask you if you think that this could be a ground for conversion, in the sense that if a person doesn't find any spiritual guide in the Catholic Church right now, whereas in Orthodoxy feels, I don't know, it can find more thriving parishes and stuff like this. And also if it's your experience in the Orthodox Church when you came from Catholicism, if you too found, more guide in the spiritual life, or if you...
I did, yeah. So you definitely will find typically more of that type of guidance. I would just hesitate on thinking that would be like the one thing that would tell you whether it's true or false. Because at some point we do have to have an analysis of the two different religious views in terms of their theology and their positions. So sometimes it's tempting, and maybe it feels daunting in terms of the theology. You think, I don't want to get into all this, I don't have time. I'm just going to judge it on the basis of, people choose, I think, at times, bad indicators for which church they choose. For example, a lot of people chose Roman Catholicism in the last several years because they thought, this is more politically based and trad. And then they end up 5 or 6 years later miserable and angry, and they feel like they made the wrong choice. So you can't make these decisions on things like, I'm not saying that can't be one element. Like, if you find a really good spiritual father, that might be one of the key things that helps you convert. But anytime we pick like one of these things like that can be a little subjective, and I'm not saying that you're not going to find that, but for example, the 2 or 3 of the people who say we're looking at Orthodoxy in the last 5 years that chose Rome, they would say things like what you're saying. They would say, I met a trad cat priest who I felt gave me a better feeling about praying the rosary and how I felt when I prayed the rosary. I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm just using it as an example. They would have all of this terminology of how it made them feel and how the rosary made them feel. And I'm like, well, don't you see? Mormons say that when you pray the Mormon prayer, you get the burning in your bosom and you feel good. So it's like you can't use that as your final arbiter. I think you can have these indicators and intuitive sort of nudges, but we have to be very careful because sometimes those inner feelings and what we think is intuition can also be deceptive. So at the end of the day, it's got to come down to the positions, which one's consistent and which one contradicts. Otherwise, you're going to be constantly kind of, maybe you, after a year of Orthodoxy and you don't feel like it's working or something. So then you're going to be, I'm going to go to Roman Catholicism, and then 2 years in Roman Catholicism, I don't feel like it works anymore. So you just can't be basing it on feelings or things that are more subjective than things that are more objective.
Okay, but what if a person is too thick?
Is what? Too thick? Like THICC? Like thick?
No, sorry, I'm Italian. If a person is too obtuse, I simply can't figure it out. They're too complex for me. Certain topics about theology and stuff. Like, I imagine like a normal person in a Catholic parish.
I mean, you can't look at like Pachamama and see a problem with that?
I know, but a person can look at, Lofton or someone else and find arguments on the other way.
No, we're not. That's a false equivalence. Michael Lofton is not the equivalent of the papacy.
No, of course not.
Right. So
I'm just saying that.
No. But what I'm saying is, a cleric engage in those kinds of actions without basically committing the sin of apostasy. And in Roman Catholic canon law, apostasy means you're out of the church. So, it's not that difficult.
No, but what I'm saying is that there are other smart dudes who say that's not apostasy, or
okay. Let's just put it this way: how do you call a crusade if you're Urban II, and if you're Benedict XVI and Pope Francis, you go and pray in the mosque towards Mecca? How are those two things not contradictions? You can't tell a contradiction.
I don't know. That's the point.
So what this points out, the point is that they don't have the worship of God there. How could you worship in a mosque towards Mecca? I mean, it's not even Christianity anymore if you're doing that. Some other religion.
No, but one could say, well, that's on him, not on the whole.
No, that's not how that system works. Have you read Vatican I?
Yes.
Okay, what does it say? Does it say anything about does it say the
protector of the guardian of the faith?
Okay, and what's the sin? Okay, wait a minute. What's the sin of apostasy?
Yeah. No, I get.
No, you don't. But what is the sin of apostasy?
It's when a person publicly renounces faith for
okay, but
else.
But it's not just like you don't have to verbally say it. I publicly renounce. You can also signify that apostasy by your actions, by your worship. You don't think so?
Yes, I think it does.
Okay. Do you think that Muslims and Christians worship the same God, and so therefore it is okay to worship in a mosque?
I don't think it's okay to worship in a mosque, but I have my reserves on whether we worship the same God.
Okay. Why would the Council of, I think, Vienne call them godless infidels if you worship the same God?
I don't know. Because infidels, okay, we can worship the same God and call you infidel.
You don't worship the same God as an infidel, by definition. And I'm pretty sure it's the Council of Vienne that calls Muslims infidels.
Okay, I thought that infidel is like you have the wrong faith.
No, that's a heretic. That's a heretic, not an infidel.
Okay.
Okay, so do you think that an anti-Trinitarian and a Trinitarian have the same God?
Could be, yeah.
How could you have this? How could they be the same God? Then, so Arius and Nicaea were worshiping the same God?
I suppose they do, yeah.
Okay, so you haven't learned the basics, and I'm not trying to be mean to you, but your Roman Catholicism has not even taught you fundamental Christian theology. The Council of Nicaea excommunicates Arius. They don't worship the same God. That's crazy. I'm not saying you're crazy. I'm saying that position is crazy. This is like Nicaea 101. How could Arius and the Council of Nicaea that excommunicates him worship the same God?
Yeah, that's also my point. I'm saying that.
Okay, so you're not struggling. So you're struggling with Christianity. That's the point I'm getting at. This is actual Christianity. This is not which is the true church. You haven't come to understand that there's no such thing as everybody worshiping the same generic God. There's only the Trinity. That's the gospel. That's what Jesus preaches in the book of John. Yeah. So no, and the very fact that you think that the same God is being worshipped by Arius and Athanasius shows that you haven't understood the gospel yet. I'm not being mean, but this is a fact. And this is why anybody with the discernment that we would have as Christians could look at going in a mosque and praying towards Mecca and say, this is not Christianity. This is some other facsimile fraudulent religion.
I mean, but that's a big leap from.
No, it's not. No, if you understand Christianity, it's not a leap at all. Do you think the Old Testament teaches a generic God, or does it teach the Trinity?
The Gospel teaches the Trinity, of course.
Oh, no, the Old Testament, not the Gospels, the Old Testament.
Oh, sorry. No, the Old Testament teaches the Trinity too.
Oh, so how is there? So where is this?
From the light of the Gospel.
Where is this Arian Unitarian God that we all worship then? Where's that coming from?
It's not. That's an error of Arius and his followers.
Okay, so then you don't believe. Sorry, so then you don't believe Nostra Aetate's Vatican II document that Muslims and Roman Catholics and Jews all worship the same God. I
wouldn't be Catholic if I told you that I don't believe in Nostra Aetate, of course. So yeah.
So well, those two things are mutually exclusive.
Well, yeah. If you think that the Catholic has contradicted itself. Yeah, if you come to this conclusion, you can be Catholic.
Well, I'm just saying the very conversation we're having, as you try to express faithfulness to Catholicism and Nostra Aetate, you're immediately confronted with the nonsensical position of trying to say that Arius and the Council of Nicaea are worshiping the same God. Okay, then why do we have a Council of Nicaea? What's the point of that? Why excommunicate Eunomius and Arius? We're all worshiping the same God.
Yeah.
When you talk to, have you ever talked to a Jehovah's Witness?
Yeah, slightly.
Does it appear in the midst of those conversations that you guys have the same theology about God?
No, but I think that they actually don't believe in our same God.
They have the same view as Arius?
Okay. Maybe, no, okay.
So then Arius and Athanasius don't worship the same God?
I just thought that Arius thought that Christ came later, but was still like one with the same God. Whereas I think Jehovah's Witnesses think that they're actually two different gods.
No, they both teach that the Son of God is the first thing God created.
Okay. Yeah, that's problematic. I wouldn't say
it's not problematic. It's a heresy. It's a different religion.
Yeah, of course. Sure.
Okay, so there's not the same deity being worshipped between a Jehovah's Witness and a person who believes in the Trinity. Two different gods.
Of course.
Then Nostra Aetate is not true, because it says that Unitarians and Trinitarians all worship the same God.
But are Jehovah's Witnesses Unitarians? I mean, yes, they are.
Yes.
But... Okay.
All right. I'm not trying to be mean, but you get the point. Good question. So I'm not downplaying your approach to looking for good spiritual guidance. I think that's a healthy initial approach, but you gotta consider the other doctrinal things that we're talking about. So again, great questions. Not being mean, just pointing out. I think is the key issue here. So, and I enjoy chatting with you, Mario. Not being mean to you. Not trying to be rude.